A reading from the book of Genesis. In those days, the Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grave, that I must go down and see whether or not their actions fully correspond to the cry against them that comes to me. I mean to find out." While Abraham's visitors walked on farther toward Sodom, the Lord remained standing before Abraham. Then Abraham drew nearer and said, "Will you sweep away the innocent with the guilty? Suppose there were 50 innocent people in the city. Would you wipe out the place rather than spare it for the sake of the 50 innocent people within it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to make the innocent die with the guilty, so that the innocent and the guilty would be treated alike. Should not the judge of all the world act with justice?" The Lord replied, "If I find 50 innocent people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Abraham spoke up again, "See how I am presuming to speak to my Lord, though I am but dust and ashes. What if there are 5 less than 50 innocent people? Will you destroy the whole city because of those 5? He answered, "I will not destroy it if I find 45 there." But Abraham persisted, saying, "What if only 40 are found there?" He replied, "I will forbear doing it for the sake of the 40. Then Abraham said, "Let not my Lord grow impatient if I go on. What if only 30 are found there?" He replied, "I will forbear doing it if I can find but 30 there." Still Abraham went on, "Since I have thus dared to speak to my Lord, what if there are no more than 20? The Lord answered, "I will not destroy it for the sake of the 20. But he still persisted, "Please, let not my Lord grow angry if I speak up this last time. What if there are at least 10 there?" He replied, "For the sake of those 10, I will not destroy it." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Colossians. Brothers and sisters, you were buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised with him through faith in the power of God, who raised him from the dead. And even when you were dead in transgressions and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he brought you to life along with him, having forgiven us all our transgressions, obliterating the bond against us with its legal claims, which was opposed to us. He also removed it from our midst, nailing it to the cross. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus was praying in a certain place, and when he finished, one of his disciples said to him, "Lord, teach us to pray, just as John taught his disciples." He said to them, "When you pray, say, 'Father, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we ourselves forgive everyone who is in debt to us. Do not subject us to the final test." And he said to them, "Suppose one of you has a friend to whom he goes at midnight and says, 'Friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread, for a friend of mine has arrived at my house from a journey, and I have nothing to offer him.' And he says in reply from within, 'Do not bother me. The door has already been locked, and my children and I are already in bed. I cannot get up to give you anything.' I tell you, if he does not get up to give the visitor the loaves because of their friendship, he will get up to give him whatever he needs because of his persistence. And I tell you, ask and you will receive, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. What father among you would hand his son a snake when he asks for a fish, or a scorpion when he asks for an egg? If you then, who are wicked, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will the Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him? The gospel of the Lord. So, of course, I cannot say a word about what happens in confession, but I can tell you about what happens before confession and after confession. And it's happened here once, but the best experience of it was down in Baltimore at a penance service that involved a lot of high school kids. And it was when one of the persons who had gone to confession gave me a whole lot of advice about what to do with other people. So this young lady who went to a school that is known to raise the sort of the most high-powered women in the city of Baltimore, she got up and made her confession, and she was leaving, and there was a big line of people that she knew, and she turns around and comes back, and I thought she was walking away. I was quite surprised. I thought maybe she forgot a sin or something. She comes back and she says, "Father, don't look, don't turn, but you see that girl right behind me? She was my best friend until noon today. If she doesn't tell you what she did in the cafeteria, she's not making a good confession. And you better ask her what she did in the cafeteria, because it really deserves like serious penance. She's not my best friend. I'm never going to speak to her again. We were best friends for like 40 years. Okay, I'm only 13, she said, but it was forever." I say, "Okay, got it. And then she goes to turn, and she says, "And that guy behind her, he probably won't tell you what happened at that party last weekend, but it was really awful. And if he doesn't tell you, he's lying. He really deserves a terrible penance. Like, you should make him stand in front of the church, like kneel on a baseball bat." And then the third one came along. She said, "Oh, but after that really creepy guy who was such a dope at the party last weekend, there's this girl. She flunked her chemistry quiz today, and she really worked hard. And her parents don't like her, and she's having a fight with them, and they're fighting with each other. You really got to be nice to her. So if you give her a penance that's really hard, you're going to have to go to confession, all right?" Got it. Anything else? Did you want to join me in the confessional so you can maybe coach the other people on their sins? And then I thought, well, maybe that would be a good thing, like as they used to do in religious orders, right? The chapter of faults. Everybody can do, or Festivus. Was that on what's his name show? Seinfeld? Like everybody can get together and hear everybody else's faults. And if they don't admit them all, you just jump in and say, "Oh, you forgot about this one, that one, and the other one," right? But I was really relieved to know that the gal's last suggestion was be really nice, because the girl at the end of the line is having a rough day. She's what we call the underdog. Underdog is easily construed simply as someone in an athletic competition, like your rowing team, for instance, isn't favored to win, so you're the underdog. But it's so much more than that. It's the person with the least advantages, the fewest advantages in any situation. So it could be sports, but it's equally, it could be a person who's lost their advantages financially, psychologically, relationally, whatever it is. They're the underdog. They are an underdog. It's not as if they're in competition, but just life isn't going their way for whatever reason. And the readings today remind us that you got to keep an eye out for the underdogs. Like, you totally have to keep your eye peeled for the underdogs around you. And your treatment of the underdogs will be one of those things that, the Lord's going to say. When did I see you as an underdog? When did you see me as an underdog and not do anything about it, right? So notice the varieties of underdogs. By the way, where does the term underdog come from? I had to look this up last week. Underdog goes back to 19th century Britain and 18th century America, when they had like dog fights, non-lethal dog fights, don't worry. But the dog that lost the dog fight was on the bottom, and that was the underdog. And what did they call the winner of the dog fight? Top dog. Yeah. So there's your etymology for the day. First reading, Genesis 18. It's right after last week's reading, also from Genesis 18. The visitors come to visit Abraham in the desert, and then they move on. And now they're going to move on, and Abraham's getting the word. Whatever's going on has something to do with these visitors, and nobody knows exactly how it comes together, but God's decided to destroy the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. Parentheses, it's as frequent and as misguided as Paul getting knocked off his horse. Did Paul get knocked off his horse on the way to Damascus? No, there's no horse in this story, but we generally think of it as he gets knocked off his horse. In the same way, is the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah necessarily about the thing that is associated with Sodom and Gomorrah? Probably not. It's about hospitality, and the whole first half of Genesis 18 sets up the second half of Genesis 18 to stress the importance of hospitality in that desert culture. That's a little bit of a sidetrack. So Don't get too swept up in the stereotypical explanation of what their sin was. It might have been part of the story, but it's certainly not the whole story, any more than Paul getting knocked off his horse is part of that story. But back to Abraham, haggling with God. The people for whom Abraham is intervening, either one, are people who are notorious sinners for whatever reason. Whatever that sin is that they committed, everybody knows about it, and it's big and it's ugly. And what does Abraham do? Say, good thing, Lord, go at him, knock him down, fire, brimstone, wipe him off the face of the earth. No, he says, Lord, I ask you to rethink that. And what's his investment? He doesn't have much of investment. His nephew, Lot, is living there, but he could just go in and say, Lot, let's get going. Something bad's about to happen. And eventually the angel of the Lord does do that on Lot's behalf. But there's Abraham intervening for the sinners, intervening for the underdogs, intervening for the ones who are in the doghouse in God's mind, intervening for the ones who in their mind have made a public mistake, a big, ugly public mistake, sin, crime, whatever else it is. And still, Abraham is there as an example of, okay, once in a while, it's really okay to pray on behalf of those people, those underdogs. In the gospel today, we get three different sections of underdogs, three different categories of underdogs. The first is the category of the debtors. Today's gospel is three chunks of teachings on prayer, three separate things. The first one includes what we know now as the Our Father. Forgive us our debts as we forgive those who have trespassed against us, as we forgive our debtors. Today's translation of Luke uses the phrase, as we forgive our debtors. Debt comes in so many forms, right? Financial debt is probably the least of it. Anybody for whom you've done anything, gracious and you've come to their assistance, in a sense, they're in debt to you. If you've helped them out in their life, if you've helped them get on a better track, they're indebted to you. But I ask you to notice this. They are the underdog. If they have any debt to you at all, they are the underdog in the situation, right? They're the one with the fewest advantages. They're the ones who can be manipulated. And notice again the life of Christ. Just as Christ intervened, as Abraham did, Christ intervened on behalf of sinners. The woman caught in adultery, Matthew in the tax booth, all of them. Jesus builds them up. Jesus upholds those underdogs we call public sinners or public bozos who've made big public mistakes. In the same way, Jesus gives us an example. Not only does he say, forgive your debtors, but he shows us what that means. How many times did Jesus heal somebody, cure somebody, bring somebody back from the dead? Did you ever hear about him sending them a bill for services rendered, right? And I don't mean just, trivially a financial bill, but does he ever say, you owe me because I did for that, you owe me now. I own you because I cured you, I taught you, I fed you, I brought you back to life, and you owe me. No, they are the debtors, they're the ones with the fewest advantages, and he doesn't rub it in their nose or their nose in it. Get over it, right? You did a good deed, so keep moving, right? What's the deal? What are you stuck on? The person's an underdog and don't take advantage of it. You did a good thing. Now pipe down and keep going. Third category of underdog, just as we have the sinners, people who've made the big goofy public error, and we have the debtors, we have the visitors. In that culture, as you know, the person who's traveling has so few advantages. They're away from home. There's no place for them to stop. They might not be able to get clean water. The question of food is iffy. And so they have very few advantages. They have all the disadvantages. And so the second part of today's gospel gives us two stories of someone comes to the door, knock, knock, in the middle of the night. You got to help me out. I'm a visitor. I kind of know you. Might not be a dear friend. Maybe just somebody I met at a barbecue 3 years ago, but you got to help me out. I'm the underdog in this situation. The first guy gets up and gets out of bed and realizes he has nothing in the house. He goes down to the neighbor's house. And he goes down to the neighbor's house and they help him out, right? The one without any assets in that story, the visitor, is the underdog, and that's the one where Jesus says, I want you to be really good to this person. Notice how Jesus' eye continually went to the underdog in any circumstance, right? That Jesus was always going on about the visitor in your midst because he knew what it was like. He was the visitor. He was the stranger. He was the alien. He was born in Bethlehem in a barn because there was no room in the inn, and his parents were far from home, and not too many people were willing to help him out. But he spent a lifetime doing exactly what one would hope they would have done for him, right? And so the visitors are the ones, whether they're visitors to the church, the new parishioners, the visitors in your class in school, they're visitors to the country, they're the migrants in one country or another. Yeah. Okay, the politics issue comes into it at some point, but no, right now, that's God's beloved. What are you doing, right? They're the underdog. And finally, the dependents. The kid, who asks for a fish, or the kid who asks for an egg. You're not going to give that kid a scorpion or a tarantula or a rock. You're not going to do that. That fourth category of underdog, the kid, the dependent. Some people spend a long piece of their life being dependent. They weren't born with all the advantages, right? Sometimes there's physical issues or intellectual issues or psychological issues. And they have a lot of disadvantages because of that. And they're the underdog, the dependent ones. And Jesus is saying, you're not going to give them a tarantula. You're not going to give them a rock to eat. Of course, you have to take good care of the people who are dependent on you. And as St. Paul says, and you got to be a cheerful giver about it. If you're not going to be a cheerful giver, keep your stupid gift. Don't insult God with that. If you can't be a cheerful giver, don't do it. Do the right thing and be glad about it. Right? Treat the underdog with respect. And so we get to 4 different categories of underdog, and each one of those things requires interior freedom for us to rise to the occasion, to answer God's call, to pay special attention to the underdog, whether that underdog is a sinner or a debtor or a visitor or a dependent. There's no clause that says, okay, do it, but except for if this, that, or the other thing, right? So the 2 questions, first, when have you been the underdog? And if you're not coming up with any answers, you're not taking a very good look, right? You've been the underdog. I've been the underdog. I've been the one with the fewest advantages, and I've probably fallen into every one of those categories at some point or another. And so have you. And who are the people who were there to uphold you? When you really messed up, and people knew about it, who was there at your side? When someone else had bailed you out, and you were in debt to them, and they didn't rub your nose in it, who was that? When you were alone by yourself, you were the visitor. And there wasn't too many parties given in your honor. And someone came and sat with you in the cafeteria. Or you've been the dependent one. And someone was there to help you. Right? We all have our stories. And they're beautiful stories of people doing what God wanted in our lives when we have been the underdogs. And then the second part of the question, of course, is where have you done a great job of getting it right? That you've been there for that other person when they were the underdog. Could be someone close to you, could be someone far away. And maybe, just maybe is the Lord nudging you right now. Come on, open your eyes further. You're not seeing the underdog right down there. Uphold that underdog. And it takes interior freedom because there's a whole lot of dark voice coming at us from this side. This dark one saying, no, that's not your problem. It's not your problem. Listen, we know we can't save the world, but we can respond to the underdog in front of us. An underdogosity comes in so many forms. When have you been the underdog? And someone was following Christ's hopes for you and came to your assistance. And where maybe just now, is the Lord saying, listen, you're a baptized person, you're a priest, you're a prophet, you're a king. Vamoose. Just like you've done so well, so many times before. So how about it? It's the underdog thing, right? And it requires interior freedom because all sorts of voices are going to say, oh, no, that's not your problem. And the Lord's not calling you to save the world. That's not your job. It was his job. He did it once. It's done, right? That's not your job. Can't save everybody. But you can be of great use to that underdog in front of you. And so we do our underdog history. The underdogs in our past, right, that you've helped out. You being an underdog. And someone heard the call of the Lord and really came to your assistance at a time that you needed it. And whether or not they assigned it to the Lord, that was what it was. It was the voice of the Lord speaking in their heart, and you did it. And maybe, just maybe, where's the Lord nudging you right now? You know, that one you sit next to all the time, that one is like way low on advantages in this life and is feeling so incredibly vulnerable. Can you just kind of like be there as I would be there for that person? When have you been the underdog? When have you been the one who upholds the underdog? And where maybe are you doing it now and called to do it some more? Was that the theme from the old Underdog TV show?
No. It was Bridge Over Troubled Water.
It was what?
Bridge Over Troubled Water.
The Bridge Over Troubled Water. I was so eager, I was so convinced that it was going to be the theme to the old Underdog.
I was trying to find it between masses and I couldn't.
Okay, thank you. It's going to be wild. You completely outdid yourself with Help last week. That was the best version of Help I ever heard in my whole entire life. Stay cool. Congratulations. It's wonderful to have Nicholas be part of the community. It's a beautiful thing. And we send him forth to be the priest and the prophet and the king who's, among other things, always there for the underdog, huh? Good for you. Let us pray.